Me
So
too.
what are some of those tales that so okay, let me ask this first. Are the stories in the book, I know they're based on your actual experiences, but how true, like how close are they? Give us the tea.
So I will admit that the three chapters called the internet, rounds 1, round 2, round 3, they're all like 98% true. Like these things just happened almost word for word, and they're really quite incredible. So they're actually kind of why I started writing the book, because I was just like in shock by how ridiculous some of these things could be. The rest of the book, there's some other characters that she didn't meet online, many of which, but not all of which, are inspired by real people. I mean, I would say there's a decent amount of fiction, but the book is deeply inspired by real events.
Wow, okay. So, can you share some of the dating disasters?
Sure. I feel like I should do Pierre the Mansplainer, just because I referred to him in the
For
rules.
sure.
So let's give him some credits. Ready?
Mhm.
Here we go. Pierre the Mansplainer, part 1. Let me start by owning the fact that this story truly should not have 2 parts. It should have been a one and done, but I was having an off day and got blindsided. It happens, right? I met Pierre at 7 p.m. at Le Bombardier near the Sorbonne. I was already seated when he arrived, looking flustered. He said bonjour and then quickly told me that the zipper on his jacket was stuck. He couldn't get out of it and asked if I could help. Because I had tiny fingers, he said. The guy seriously asked, as his opening line, for me to help with his zipper. It wasn't his pants, but still. I took one look at the jacket zipper and knew it wasn't coming unstuck, so suggested he just slip it off over his head. I watched as he awkwardly wiggled himself out of the jacket, tossing it onto the chair and settling into our table. What a weird start. I ordered a glass of Bordeaux. He ordered tea. Who drinks tea at 7 p.m. on a date? In retrospect, I should have left immediately based on that choice alone. He then proceeded to rapid fire questions at me for 54 minutes. I clocked it. The questions were about my work, my studies, my family, my expat life in France. I never had the chance to ask him anything because I was apparently being interviewed for a job, the job of being his girlfriend. But it turns out it wasn't so much of an interview as it was a pre-screening. After these strange 54 minutes, he put some money on the table, quickly stood up and said, well, this has been fun. You're really interesting. I have a dinner to get to, but I'd like to see you again. How's Saturday? Had my brain been firing at full speed, I could have, would have, should have simply said, no merci, and put myself out of the impending misery. But as mentioned, I was having an off night. I uneasily agreed while he clumsily struggled to get his zipped up jacket back over his head. None of it was graceful. Great, I'll text you, he said as he bolted out the door. I sat there stunned for a solid minute, wondering what the hell had just happened, and then resigned myself to part 2. Part 2. Saturday arrived, and Pierre suggested that we meet at the Grand Boulevard Metro. In my experience, meeting at a metro stop means the guy has no plan, so we inevitably spend the first 20 minutes of the date wandering around, usually on cobblestones, with me in heels, to find an acceptable spot. Between this and the less than auspicious part 1 of this encounter, I was not jazzed about the evening, but at this point, I was committed. I got on the metro, and while en route, he texted saying he was going to be 15 minutes late. It was raining, so I asked, always hopeful, if he had a place in mind. I suggested I could head directly there rather than waiting at the metro stop in the rain. I ended the text with a smiley face emoji because that softens it, right? He replied saying he didn't have a place in mind, but maybe he would only be 5 minutes late after all. Subtext, you'll wait in the rain. Deal with it. Charmed, I'm sure. I huddled under the awning of the metro station until he arrived, and we emerged into the rain together. We wandered into 2 places that were fully booked before eventually landing in a small Italian restaurant that was completely devoid of charm. The fact is that on Saturday night in Paris, reservations are required for any place that's even remotely nice. I wasn't expecting a Michelin star, but I do appreciate it when someone takes the time to actually plan a date. Is that so much to ask? We were looking over the menu when he proclaimed, they have ravioli, you know, the pasta, with stuff inside. There was an accompanying hand gesture to demonstrate the putting of stuff into the pasta pocket. Or was he pantomiming sex? I instinctively cocked my head to the side like a dog trying to understand its human. Did he really just mansplain ravioli to me? All this happened in French, of course, so I took an extra second or 2 to be sure I understood what was happening. When my brain confirmed that it was the disaster it seemed to be, it was too late for a snarky reply, so I simply went with, yeah, sure, ravioli. I somehow managed to keep my exaggerated eye roll on the inside. Suffice it to say that the conversation didn't improve, so by the time dinner was over, I was desperate to escape. I told him I'd take the metro home, and because he lived in the same direction, he said he'd join me. It was my lucky night. In the metro, he asked if I was a natural redhead. I told him I was not. He then mansplained, because there are natural redheads in the world. Yes, dear readers, he mansplained ravioli and redheads in the course of 90 minutes and then asked if I wanted to go home with him. I did not.
Outstanding.
Well, so then after that, she makes the rule, no more metro stop dates, but she breaks it a time or two and always regrets it.
I mean, we got to stick to our boundaries. That's the lesson. If you
Really.
don't stick to your boundaries, you are doomed to repeat that mistake over and over until it clicks and you stop doing it. Right?
Yes. She learned that the hard way.
Oh my goodness.
She is me.
Oh my God. So I just got to know. So that's one, but I know that there are several in the book, which I'm sure are increasingly more and more hilarious because that's so funny. And I mean, it has to be. Do you sometimes feel like it could only be comedy, like a comedy of errors, like these experiences that you've had that inspired the book?
Absolutely. I mean, when I started writing it, I definitely thought it was going to be just a bunch of slapstick, just these ridiculous one after another encounters. But at the end, what made it? When I got all that down on paper, I had to sort of think about, all right, what makes this a novel rather than a random collection of anecdotes? What is the red thread that kind of pulls all that through? And that's where the female friendships came in. Where that became so core to the story, because it was about the debrief after, where you're sitting down with the girls and talking about what happened and saying, gosh, like, when am I going to learn this lesson to stop doing that, to hold on to my boundaries, to not be afraid to say who I really am. I mean, one of the other things that she learns / I learned over the course of all this dating was, in the internet round one, she doesn't say that she's traveled to more than 70 countries. She doesn't say that she went to a big university. She doesn't talk about her big job because she's trying not to intimidate people. And then with each round, she decides to disclose a little bit more about who she really is, deciding that, if they don't like who she really is, then they're not the guy. And, I read somewhere once that, for the right person, you can never be too much or too little of anything.
I love that. Mm-hmm.
And I think she kind of learns that along the way in the book, to say, okay, well, I'm not going to try to make myself smaller. I think, I was listening to this podcast. It was Glennon Doyle's We Can Do Hard Things, which is, I love that podcast. But Lily Collins of Emily in Paris. Thanks for the shout earlier, Emily, who I love that.